Now the unspeakable thing has been said out loud, and no one's running. In fact, she's feeling closer to them. In fact, it feels better than ever. It's inspiring the men to show up for her in a way that she's never had before. Hi everyone, I'm Julie, she's Kelly, and we're here to find love. We're back again this week for another Bachelorette recap. Today we're recapping episode 5 of Jenn's season of The Bachelorette. For those of you who don't know us, we're two dating coaches who analyze the relationship psychology and dating themes in reality TV shows, especially The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. If you're into this kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button to follow along and join the conversation. You can also listen to us on podcast form in Apple and Spotify podcasts. And of course, sitting beside me is not Kelly. She's actually off right now traveling the world and being an incredible nomad. So joining me is my partner and love of my life, Jeremy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody.
We can't wait to get into this week's episode. So as always, everybody, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing what you think. If you're listening on podcasts, shoot us a DM on Instagram while you listen. So get cozy, have a cup of tea, and let's get into it. This week, we start off the episode with her ex attempting to join the season. We got a little bit of backstory on him and Jenn's short but apparently very meaningful relationship last episode. So they dated for a few months. It seems like they were quite young when they got together. He hasn't been able to get over her. He feels like he loves her, which was really intense and provoked a lot of emotions in Jenn because she hasn't had anyone ever tell her that they were in love with her. So it threw her for a tizzy. All of the men were just not having it. They were so unhappy about the thought of her ex joining. But of course, Jenn makes the decision to leave her ex in the past because she sees her future in the room. So I thought that it was a very noble effort, him coming in and attempting to win her back, and I'm glad they had closure. It wasn't perfect, but I do think it was enough for him to feel like he could close the chapter and move on. To his credit, he also apologized to the men. Didn't go well because the men started to kind of lobby some insults along. But yeah, Jeremy, what did you think about her ex coming back in? Just the whole narrative of, their story and how Jenn handled that situation.
Well, that was a low blow that he received at the very end, so I did feel bad for him there. Well, I mean, it's interesting because you can see how much of it has been framed as this very dramatic moment to bring him in at a very inconvenient time. And I we were discussing this, and I think there's so much information that's missing to provide like the full context around what had happened. What's the nature of their original relationship? Why did they break up? What was the nature of their friendship? And where were these feelings coming from? Why wasn't anything said in the past? I think a lot of that is still a mystery. So it's kind of hard to kind of make any conclusion or judgment around what happened. But ultimately, Jenn's decision about it says everything, which is this is something in the past that I'm not willing to revisit, and maybe I have changed so much or you have changed so much that whatever was good back then is not what I'm looking for now. I think that's a very powerful statement. And it was interesting. I did appreciate his courage to come in and apologize. But yeah, still I'm confused around the timing of all of that. I'm pretty sure he knew that she was going on to this show. And, why not take the moment to profess his love then before she even got into this very messy situation. And I could see too that as much as it brought confusion into her feelings about this, bringing someone into the mix this late is just going to create so much messiness and so much drama, and I think that would cause a lot more problems than it would help her find what she's looking for. At least that's my impression.
Oof, that's really well put, because some of the men accurately assessed that him joining the season would have been an unfair advantage because they have so much history that the show would have changed the path that she was on. Right now, she's exploring these new aspects of herself, and she's exploring it of all of these men. I think this episode really showed her kind of co-creating emotional intelligence with all of the dates that she was on. With her ex being in the picture, yes, it could have offered healing that maybe the dates that she has with all of the other people wouldn't, but it would have added another layer of complexity that I'm not sure she needs to handle. Like, we all have capacity to, really integrate our stories, but there's a matter of how much do you take on. And she doesn't need to take on an ex-boyfriend and 11 other people that she's juggling these relationships with. I think it was a wise choice for her to really make the decision to, that's kind of the camp I'm in. Like, I really believe that it's so rare to make things work out with an ex unless you've both changed into people that can grow together. You would have to be two people that are kind of at like similar stages of where you're at. And I think that her and her ex, it was very apparent that they had changed into two different people. And that was something he also brought up of like, whoa, this experience has shifted her away from a person that would be interested in being in a relationship with me and the relationship I'm hoping to have with her.
And that's the thing, is that when each of you have changed so much, it's a completely new relationship. So the danger is you can bring in all this historical baggage and historical patterns that may not even be applicable anymore. So you're recreating and reinventing the entire relationship. So it's a little bit like starting from scratch, and it can be overcomplicated because if you change so much, you're now bringing on the echo of an older person that's no longer there, and you have to like unwind that too. So it does get very tricky. Not to say that's impossible. I think, perhaps they've both grown and matured into more patient, more compassionate, more understanding people that would make the relationship easier. But yeah, it is a disservice to the 11 guys she's already dating now, which is already way too much.
I noticed that happening for Jenn this episode. Me and Kelly have had this ongoing theory about what Jenn's journey is really going to look like. And we have hypothesized that this is really us seeing in real time a person rework her romantic narratives from the jump. Like, she is reframing everything. She's seeing old situations from a slightly different perspective, and that's a huge part of growth, right? It's just a shift in the way that you're perceiving things. So I think even her releasing that and not chasing after that kind of connection did move something. I was happy to see her handle it the way that she did. I think for the men on her season, and for maybe any other season, they were excited to, just kind of keep it to what it is and to explore the journey as it is right now. So then next in the episode, we have her one-on-one date of Jonathon, and I love this date. I love the two of them together. I liked how he was making fun of the fact that all of her dates involve heights, and he hates heights, she hates heights. He's like, what are we doing on a helicopter? I hate this so much, but I guess let's get into it. I thought that was so real. And I loved in his talking head how he kept, saying, I have such fun, lighthearted banter with Jenn, which I think all of the men have. But what he's really seeking is a deep emotional connection. And he was like, I really want to know who you are so I can feel comfortable showing who I am. And then they really had this open conversation about two relationships in the past that they separately had that was encircled in some type of emotional abuse in terms of toxicity and gaslighting, manipulation. It was really beautiful to see him share and for her to engage in that sharing in a thoughtful way. And she was also kind of engaging in this mutual reciprocation of, you're sharing this, I will share this about something I also experienced with my ex. They're very much energetically on the same page. I like them together. Jonathon is by far my favorite person for her. And you had some really interesting thoughts as you were watching the episode last night.
There was a lot to determine, and maybe to step back a little bit, you mentioned this too. I think we are witnessing something beautiful, which is her real-time evolution and the growth of her emotional intelligence just through this experience. And you could see her starting to practice that because she's just holding space for all these guys, starting to become vulnerable and realizing, okay, this is how I'd like to be tended to with my emotions, and she's showing up to it, and she's like getting some real practice. Like it's actually quite beautiful. And we'll talk about this later, but the level of vulnerability she's able to put forth was game changing, I think, in this particular episode. But yeah, with Jonathon, I'd say that 3 things really stood out to me about him. One is authenticity. I think him stepping into the helicopter and just expressing, this is how I feel, like I'm afraid. He's not, trying to be macho and show, a brave face. He was just like, this is who I am, this is what I'm going through. I think that's quite refreshing to see that, especially when there's like so much testosterone in the group of men. I do like that he was seeking depth. You called this out, where it's not just about having fun and giggles and just having just like high energy. Can we like go through emotional conversations with each other and really talk about deeper feelings that we're experiencing? And that's so critical in a relationship, because it's not always going to be pleasant, sunshine and rainbows your entire relationship. You're going to go through hard times, you're going to go through tough situations, and you need to know, is my partner going to be able to handle me when things are really tough? And can I handle my partner when things are really tough? So I really appreciated the fact that that was a priority for him. I think the third thing was just gentleness. I think he was very kind and thoughtful and gentle with his words, the way he tended to her. I think Jonathon is certainly a good match and a good fit. So I agree with you on that one. I don't know if he's my favorite per se, but he's cool.
You don't think he's your favorite?
I don't really have a favorite, to be honest. But yeah, he's a good one. Mm-hmm.
What I like about his energy, similar to Grant, who we'll talk about later on, was that their energy feels very masculine without being overly macho and combative, similar to Devin and Sam M. They just get into these little tiffs with each other that just feels a little bit more of them. They're just kind of forgetting the purpose of the show, whereas I feel like Jonathon and Grant can just kind of stay in an energy that Jenn appreciates and likes, but they're not feeding into the drama of the house. So that's what I like about Jonathon. I like that they have conversations where it does feel like they're both getting something out of it, and they're matching each other's vulnerability, and it's not like he's plunging too deep. He's staying at a level that Jenn feels like is accessible for her. She is a new person. She is a newcomer to how she's expressing her emotions and how she's opening up about these things in the past. And I have a suspicion that Jonathon is very much on a similar level, and that's why it's so refreshing to see these conversations, because they're getting as much out of it as they're putting in, and it doesn't feel like one person is lacking. It doesn't feel like one person is holding back. So I am just like, okay, like out of all of the guys, and I haven't liked a lot of her guys this season, as you know, I've just been like, oh, I don't know if I like it for Jenn, but I do like Jonathon in terms of how they added this new dimension to their connection in episode 5, and it really was, I can have fun with you and I can open up with you, and I'm surprised by you. I think that kind of sparkly energy it will make their connection grow so much more.
Yeah, agreed. And was this the one that ended up in the rain as well?
Yes, this was the
That was a very iconic scene. It's like, oh my god, I was thinking like, this is totally staged. They're dumping water on the it's
You're
like
most
the camera
likely
pans
right.
out a little further, and it's just like a bucket of water dropped on
it. It's an intern who's just like, oh my god, here I go again, just spraying the hose down on the people.
Romantic.
I mean, I fell for it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the cutest thing. And it did feel very much like a rom-com, and I think that's something that he had expressed. You're right, I'm kind of mixing him a little bit with Grant, because both those dates felt so similar in a really good way. But I think that he's also interested in having this relationship that not only looks good, but feels good. By the way, have we mentioned we have an Instagram? Come find us on there. We're always posting more quick takes, behind the scenes of filming, and after hour thoughts on the latest Bachelor Nation relationship news. It's a super fun way to stay connected, and you can always DM us about what you're excited to hear us talk about any Bachelor episode. Hope to see you over there. Now we get into the part of the episode that I just found super fascinating in terms of all of these projections and communication just totally missing each other. Jenn is having a good episode so far. She's feeling really confident. She's in her element. She looks incredible. She's having these like makeouts with the guys. It just feels like she's really on top of the world. And then they have a group date. They're herding sheep around. Everybody, again, of course, gets mad at Devin. And I just thought it was super funny because she kept saying that she wanted to be with somebody that took initiative. And he was the only one that took initiative. I think the other guys were so focused on doing the game versus focusing on Jenn, which is the whole point of this date. It's to focus on Jenn.
Devin was playing a higher level of chess because they did take initiative in herding the sheep and being farmers, but they missed that the real game is connecting with Jenn. So I think Devin realized, okay, I can't compete with these farmers. I'm just going to go talk to the girl and make a connection. And that's the real game. That's like what we're really trying to do here. I think their anger also is fair because they were following the rules of the show. So it's not like they were coming up with an unreasonable emotion. It's like, hey, we were told to do this. We followed the instructions. Yet this guy didn't follow the instructions. He played a smarter game. So there's a disappointment, there's a frustration, and then there's an envy kind of mixed in together. So yeah, it's just, kind of sucks for everybody, except Devin.
Devin has been a very complicated figure this entire season. He's been someone to root for. He's been someone to not give a lot of grace for because of the way that he has this really intense, competitive, I don't care, I'm going to have all this time with Jenn energy that just rubs the men the wrong way. I do think that he's taken that affirmation of, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to find love, extremely seriously, and he's just leaning hard into that. But I felt like because Jenn had spoken about it so much throughout the day in her talking heads, where she was like, I want somebody to take initiative. He did seem like he was the only person that understood on an unspoken fundamental level what Jenn was all about. And the other guys getting upset with him for not playing the rules of the show have been, I think, too caught into the show and not as caught into their connection with Jenn, which says something to me about their real connection of Jenn. I feel like it's a little less and it's a little bit more about looking good.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, I was going to say that there's another dimension there too, which is a sense of brotherhood and camaraderie. It's like, hey, we're all together in this polyamorous relationship. Like, we gotta be bros too, and like, help each other out. So I think, and you can see this, like, when the guys are saying goodbye to each other, they're showing so much love to each other. It's like, love you, bros, like, take care.
Yeah.
So I think when someone steps out of that and they start tending to themselves and their own needs versus thinking about the brotherhood, the reaction is kind of like, what the hell, you betrayed us. I think there's that at play at the same time with all the other stuff too.
Ooh. That's an interesting framing because in polyamorous relationships, sometimes there is a primary relationship, an anchor relationship. Is that Devin?
Right.
Where Devin's just kind of the person, and it's not like she's actively prioritizing him, but I think because he is such a huge initiator, it's hard for her not to fall into that energy. But I agree that there is something about brotherhood, camaraderie, and not only that, but in really having the social intelligence to know that a huge part of this experience is of Jenn, but most of it is living with the guys in the house and how much they like me, how much they care and not even care, like respect me in the way that I'm respecting them. I would say he's failing in that, but he is playing a good game of Jenn.
Yeah, and he had an opportunity to, I think, tend to that and like, basically when he's like sitting with the guys, I think he opted for, hey, I'm doing this thing and that's the way I play it, versus like, hey, listen, guys, I just mutually respect all of you, but this is like, what my heart's telling me, and it's like, I think he created a bit more of a separation in the way he handled that conversation versus trying to repair. So he's got these missed opportunities as well.
He does. And something about that's a little bit clumsy or just not, it just doesn't bode well when somebody plays the game that way on their season, because they are joining this universe, this Bachelor Nation universe of all of these other leads and all of these other contestants that happens after the show. And Devin hasn't had enough supporters, enough people that can really back him and say, like, this guy is playing the game for this reason, because I think he is so invested in his own perspective and not really bringing other people into this expansiveness of how he's seeing something. So, yeah, like, he won the best farmer. He had extra makeout time with Jenn. The men were, like, super mad. Something that was a really interesting shift was Austin. So Austin has been on the show. He really likes Jenn on the show, because I just haven't really seen his connection to Jenn. I haven't seen him having a lot of connections, and he starts to get really in his head this episode. He does want to be in a relationship with Jenn, but he was like, I don't know if I could get there in terms of getting engaged to this person who I've had absolutely no time with. I want to see her choose me the way that I'm choosing her every single week. He didn't get the group date rose. He didn't have a lot of time with Jenn, and he opens up to Jenn and says, it's not fair for me to be on the show. It's not fair for you. It's not fair for the other guys. I'm just going to go. So much of what he didn't say was, I feel rejected. I feel like I'm not being chosen by you. I feel like you don't even like me. So why am I here? Why am I putting myself out here? I'm just going to go. I think he withheld that vulnerability, which makes sense because him and Jenn haven't built this foundation so they could really feel open and honest with each other. But oh boy, does it send Jenn into a spiral. And then it kind of adds in all of her own projections about how she feels like she's not enough, like she's not worthy. To me, it really unearthed this authenticity and vulnerability in Jenn that we've been seeing, but we haven't seen fully presented in such a clear way before. What did you think about the Austin and Jenn miscommunication that occurred?
It was a strange set of coincidences that opened up one of the most important insights, I think, in this entire season. Because I think it was an accident because he just didn't reveal the full feedback of like why exactly he was leaving, and that ambiguity like had her default to a specific wound that she's had for a very long time, probably from childhood and through her past relationships, which is, am I not good enough? Am I worthless? And that's a very common wound that many of us actually have, that we tend to go through in our trauma healing and move past. So I think that was maybe a happy, unfortunate coincidence that it opened it up for her. And she was in a space where she now had an opportunity to be vulnerable and say, this is something that I'm actually really genuinely feeling right now, and I need to like move through it. And she just happens to be surrounded by a bunch of guys that like totally will help validate her and help her process it. So it's like one after the other, she has a gauntlet of people that are just boosting up her ego and helping her like, move through it and change the narrative. So man, if there was like one opportunity to like bring out your skeletons in the closet and have it tended to and cared for, that was it. It's like back to back. She had everything she needed. She had a bunch of handsome guys holding space for her, giving her validation, making out with her. It's like, okay, that's one way to heal a wound. And healing like this, like, it's a process. It's not something that just like one evening of validation will change all that. There's a lot of deeper forgiveness that she has to move through with whoever created those original wounds. I'm going to hypothesize it was probably from her parents. But I think having her recognize that and have this ability to express that in a safe space, that's very powerful, like really, really powerful. To me, I think this was one of the most powerful, authentic moments on the show. And there are not a lot of authentic moments on the show, unfortunately, at least for me. So I was very, very happy to see that and see the way everybody operated with integrity in that moment.
It was a perfect storm that needed to happen. And that is one of the reasons why I felt Austin was such an amazing catalyst to inspire that moment. He broke the script of how the show was kind of just moving through the episode, of her just being like, I'm the super confident bachelorette that everybody just wants, and I feel so assured of myself when that's not it's true, but it's not her entire story. I think she was able to bring in aspects of herself that weren't true, but needed to be soothed and reintegrated and rewritten, because Austin decided to say, I'm not just gonna go through the paces of this and get sent home when I can tell she doesn't really like me like she likes the other men. We haven't gotten far enough yet, and I want to be autonomous in how I'm choosing how this happens to me too. So he kind of created this new energy by him making the decision to say no, which is why your no is so powerful. It creates new energy from you deciding, I'm not going to do something that doesn't honor me. I'm just going to go home. I don't need to wait for you to send me home. And because he did that, it made Jenn interact with him differently. I was a little bit surprised that she defaulted to that narrative so quickly. It shows how much it was just so close to the surface for her. If I was her, I'd be like, makes sense. Never gave him a date, never gave him a one-on-one. I was going to send him home, actually.
Right.
I'm just going to, move on to my other connections. And I feel like he made the right choice to himself because it was so close to her. And she felt like, oh my God, I'm doing a really bad job as a bachelorette. I don't even feel like, and this was a direct quote from her, I do feel a future in this room, and I also feel a future where I'm totally alone. She really brought in this deeper truth that she was able to present to the men. It was great that all of the men basically were holding her, and they were just like, no, you're totally worthy, you're totally enough. And she's like, thank you. That really means a lot. Yeah, let me just cuddle into your arm.
I think she got what she needed in the moment. And
yeah.
I think you call this out very clearly, which is, it's something that's so close to her. It's a wound that is so deep and profound that it colors so much of her behavior. And I can understand her so much better now, because I'd always been curious about her this season, which is like, how come she's so much on the surface? How come she's projecting an aura of something that it's like, it's wonderful and nice, but it seems like it's missing something real. And this like helped close or like complete the picture for me, which is, okay, it's an overcompensation for this fear of not being worthy, this fear of being worthless. So she's compensating that by putting out this very confident, bubbly, warm, kind, thoughtful persona. But it's, I think as she's able to heal that and let go of that old belief system, which is not true, that'll allow her to temper a lot of this like very outward projection that I can just kind of sense is it's not being fully authentic. And listening to her say that, honestly, it was very sad. I just felt very bad for her. It's like, nobody ever should have to feel that belief, which is you're worthless, because you as a human being are inherently worthy. And to see how much she's putting out there was a little bit heartbreaking. So I'm happy for her that she's able to touch that and see it and like get the support that she needs. Like I think we're still very early in seeing her journey moving through this, but it's a good step.
I totally agree, and it was really beautiful to see her having these two conflicting self-images being presented to her, how she has perceived herself based on experiences in her past and what she's experiencing right now, which feels like a fairy tale being brought to life. She is being put on a pedestal. She is decked out in all of this jewelry, all of these clothes, all of these men are clamoring to get time and attention with her. Her ex flew across the world to be with her. And part of it is because she's a bachelorette, which makes it even more confusing to reconcile those two identities together, because it's not a totally organic setting. That is the trick of being on the show and being the lead. Going back to Matt, did he want to be with Jenn or did he want to be with Bachelorette Jenn, who is now famous because of her being the lead? Do these men want to be with her, or do they want to be with her because everybody else wants to be with her? There's all of this. It's a lot to parse through. And I felt like for Jenn, what was the most important in that moment was she has this new self-image of, I'm going to be really open about something I don't like being open about. I don't like being open about the fact that I have these fears that if you really see me as I am, You're not going to choose me. You're not going to like me back. Hell, you're abandoning me. And for all of these guys to really show up and tell her that's not true, those words are so deeply healing for her to experience, because now the unspeakable thing has been said out loud and no one's running. In fact, she's feeling closer to them. In fact, it feels better than ever. It's inspiring the men to show up for her in a way that she's never had before. And you and I had spoken about that when we were watching the episode last night, when she was opening up to all of these men during, their one-on-one conversations. I saw something in her face of like, oh my gosh, I've never experienced such a healthy relating before, like a healthy conversation, feeling validated, feeling heard, not being pushed aside, not being gaslit, not being manipulated, all of these words that she's used to describe her past relationships. So it did feel like that was a really pivotal moment. And she even brought it up when she was like, last night didn't go like how I wanted. It went even better than I thought it would go.
Yeah. Well, I love the way that you describe her situation, in that it's this fantasy setting where she's got all of this stuff lined up to boost her ego. And yet, despite all of that, she still feels this very painful belief. And I think it's a testament to the fact that no amount of external validation is going to give you that self-love. It has to come from you. Because they're throwing it at her and they're giving her everything. You're like helicopter rides in this pristine, beautiful countryside, and to still believe that it has to come ultimately from her. I think that was a very profound lesson in being able to witness that.
It reminds me of that quote, wherever you go, there you are. You can never outrun yourself as far as you've met yourself. And it doesn't really matter where in the world she is, the kind of man on her arm. She has to really believe in it. And she has to really believe that she deserves this. And by deserving it, she has to have a deep relationship with herself. This is all being created in real time. And what I really hope for her is that she is co-creating it, most importantly with herself. And then she can co-create it with somebody else when she feels really stabilized. I do always feel a little bit worried when somebody creates their sense of self through the validation of somebody else or through their partner. It has to come from you first. And then when it comes from you, it feels unshakable, this truth, so you can really stand up for yourself and your non-negotiables and what you need, and not feel like you can kind of like waver depending on how your partner might be experiencing you or what they need. So there's so much happening with Jenn, and I felt like this was a very growth-oriented episode, one of the most authentic showings of who she was, and the guys really showed up for her in a way that I enjoyed.
Yep, it's a far cry from the strip club, I'll say that.
By the way, if you watched this point in the video and you're not subscribed to your channel yet, please hit that subscribe button. We do this every single week and recap every single episode of The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, and so on. So subscribe and follow along. The next date that she goes on, her last one-on-one, is her date with Grant. Horseback riding, it started to rain. He used the opportunity to make this analogy of like, it doesn't matter if it's raining, if it's sunny, I'm always going to be with you no matter what. I accept relationships in all states. He is really growing on me. I've always liked Grant. I haven't seen their connection, so I wasn't able to truly root for him. But he was able to be really open about his family and about his father and the addiction struggles that he had, and how that really impacted him, and how they're growing in their relationship, and how he wants to be the kind of person that his father wasn't able to be for him. And Jenn has a history and a background in medicine, so she was able to really relate to what Grant was going through. And I think they had this conversation where they were really able to show up for each other. I like him. I like him for her. I think that what was kind of surprising, or not too surprising, but he confessed to the men and not to Jenn. He was like, hey guys, I'm gonna let you know I'm falling in love with Jenn.
Yeah,
Guys were.
that felt
What did you
impulsive.
think?
What I imagine is like his heart is just so alive that he needed to express it to somebody, and probably the least strategically intelligent move, I would say, in the house. But I understand where he's coming from. He's just like he's on cloud nine. Yeah, because I'm not sure if there's a benefit to doing that, because I think it obviously triggered a lot of the guys by saying that. But regarding the date, I think it was very nice and very pleasant, and I think it was great for them to be able to find this commonality in their childhood and the struggles that they have with dealing with parents that couldn't tend to them, so they had to tend to their own needs. Like I could see how that commonality could bring them this new level of closeness. I think from my perspective, I just personally have not seen enough of like what is like the nature of their full connection relationship. I think they're having fun, they're able to kiss, and then they're talking about this like common trauma that they have. But then what else is there? And I have not seen that personally, so it's hard for me to know whether there's something very deep there. But yeah, overall, he's a cool guy and seems to fit. That's why I don't have his favorite. I'm just missing information.
I love that you're a man of substance. I'm just like, if 80 man is just kind of like meeting the bar for me, and the bar is so low on her season, I'm like, okay, Jenn,
get married.
Date him. But not even get married, because that was another thing that you and I had spoken about last night. I don't know if she's ready to get married, and that kind of leads us into this next conversation, which is the predictions of the season. It had this mid-season trailer that was super dramatic. All of the guys were like, I love you. And she's like, I don't feel like I am being chosen by some of these guys. It was just a whiplash of all of these emotions, all of these fears coming to the surface. I don't think she's ready to be in a marriage. Of course, she can decide whatever she wants. This is just my speculation on the editing of the show. She is learning so much about herself. She is just really finding these healthy relationships as much as she can in this contrived artificial setting. I don't know if you can get married from your first relationship when you're really experiencing your healing journey, and she's kind of just on the first few steps. It's a good path. She is on the right path. But how do you know who you want to be at the end of that path? You're undergoing such a massive transformation. Yeah. So not get married, but date. Date the hell out of them.
Completely agree. And when you go through that kind of healing and transformation, you have no idea who you are going to be 1 year from now, let alone 10 years from now, let alone 30 years from now, married to the same person. That's a very challenging assumption to make on both sides, because all of these men have their own journeys to go through too. Like we're just getting small snippets of their traumas and their hangups and their patterns that they have to work through as well.
I know.
And they're, I think this entire batch, they're quite young. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But, the preview, it sounds like she was saying that she's not ready to let the person propose to her, which I didn't take as I don't want to be with you. It's more like I just don't think I want to get married right now, but let's explore something. That's kind of what I'm sensing will play out, but who knows?
Right. What I'm hoping is that there have been a few speculations that she might propose to the man. I don't want her to do that. I want her to just be like, I'm not going to let you propose because I think we should just get to know each other and date. It's not as exciting as getting the ring, but it does feel more honest to where she's truly at in her journey and what she really needs, which is a really nice guy that would treat her well and will be there and ready for her. She hasn't experienced that with Matt. Like, Matt only wanted to be with her after, he saw where she was at. These guys are getting to know her, but I really want somebody to show up for her in an honest way based on where she's at. And that does, in my perspective, just mean a relationship where they just get to know each other a little bit better. She's getting to know herself as well. So that's my hopeful prediction, that she just is like, let's just make it official, but let's not get into a marriage by any way of the word. And one thing that I was bringing up last night, as me and Jeremy were just watching the episode, I don't know if I like her and Marcus together, because I just feel like he gives her so little and she takes it as so much. I think she's really projecting a lot more substance than what he's actually providing. And it really reminded me a lot of when I was younger, when I was a young adult, high school, college. I was really attracted to these mysterious men that would give me nothing. They would just be so quiet and they just wouldn't talk to me. And I would think, oh my God, I must unravel them. There's something so much more profound than what's actually being presented. And I fear that her being into somebody like Marcus is her kind of, he is a better patterning of an emotional, unavailable person, but he is representing the seed of that attraction, which is, he's not really giving a lot. He is quite quiet. He is quite reserved. I think that because when he opens up, it feels so much meaningful because she knows he doesn't do it often. But I would really like I would like her to be with somebody like a Grant, like a Jonathon, who is more forthcoming with it and can energetically meet her in this really optimistic, uplifting space versus Marcus, where he just feels like he's brooding in the corner of his turtleneck, you know?
I mean, I think your insight is brilliant. I didn't even notice that until you called it out. And, it speaks to probably the relationship that she might have had with her father, which might have been just very distant and very disengaged because they're too busy dealing with a divorce. And that pattern is kind of imprinted towards, okay, this is like the men that I'm going to gravitate to, and like I have a little bit of something to achieve or prove by building a connection with that person. There's something from that childhood trauma that might be playing out in this particular situation. So yeah, great call out. I really like that insight.
Out of all of the guys, Grant and Jonathon, I really, really like them, but it still doesn't feel quite as loaded as it does with Sam M and Devin. Austin left, and then she said, well, Marcus, Sam M, and Devin think I'm enough. And I'm like, why'd you only call out those three? Like, the most...
It's the subconscious talking, yeah.
It's her top three, It's the people that she has this connection with. So that kind of gave me a little bit of insight on how different the three of them all are, especially Marcus. Sam M and Devin are quite similar in some ways, and that's why they're just kind of picking at each other constantly, because they just, when something really bothers you about someone else and you just can't process it, it's usually an unhealed aspect of who you are. So they're just kind of mirroring each other and just like, oh, I don't like you. Yeah. And then Marcus is like to the corner, just like.
I like how they had their like bro moment when Sam was kicking out Matt and Devin was like, yeah, that's right. Get out of here.
I know.
It's like, look at that. A common enemy unites all.
It totally does. If Matt had joined the show, I suspect that Devin and Sam M would have been best friends.
Yeah.
It was the bromance interrupted, maybe for the better, because it would have been way too much testosterone.
It would have been a toxic bromance, yeah. Very toxic.
It's exciting to see how Jenn's season is panning out. We are super excited to see her progression as she taps into who she is. She's already changed so much in the beginning of the season to where she's now. I feel like she's better able to hold space for people. She's able to have these deeper connections with all of these men. I can't wait to see who she decides to choose. I'm hoping it's herself. So maybe, you know what?
Yeah,
I hope she ends up alone.
And happy with that,
And happy with that.
Like alone and sad or alone and happy, I think those are two different pathways. Or it's like pick your trauma pattern. Like, what's it going to be? Is it
Totally.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We shall see.
Because I do think there is something so beautiful when you're healing and you get to be single and have the opportunity to not be defined by another partnership. It is what it is, because this is Jenn. She can totally choose what she wants. She can get married. She can be in a relationship. She can propose to the person. We will, of course, support her because this is her love story. But I would just hope that she's like, I'm not going to choose any of you guys, and I'm just going to go back home. I'm famous. Now I can just date whoever I want.
That is the ultimate empowerment right there. Ultimate empowerment. Yeah. I would be cheering her on for choosing that. But, I
Totally.
think any choice that she makes is part of the longer lesson and journey she's going to take. And, there's growth ahead in every single path. So there's no wrong answer on this one. It's just life.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's always so fun watching the show with you, so I'm glad that we're getting to talk about it to the HTFL audience.
My pleasure. You make it fun. Honestly, this would not be my thing if it weren't for you. You and Kelly.
He hates reality TV, by the way. He just feels so
not
bad
hate,
for them.
Not hate, just not my thing.
Oh my god, I'll be like so mean and snarking next to him, and he would just like have a tear in his eye. Like, I can't believe that people are going through this. You're too kind for the world. Kelly will be back next week to join us for episode 6. Thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you guys soon. Bye!